Right.
See this. This is going to be a problem with the camera. Okay. We're live. Oh my! I'm going to make you a star. So, is that okay? Oh, beautiful. Okay. Sometimes you get reflections, you know.
Yeah, no, thanks for testing.
There's a mass media version.
Oh, that's impressive. Your skills during the COVID era must have been deeply called upon. Yeah. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to Peace Shabbat. We're right in the last closing bit of Veterans Day as we reckon it on the secular calendar, which began life as Armistice Day, the day in 1918 where all of the fighting was officially stopped. People signed a piece of paper and mostly kept by it for a while, at least, ended the war to end all wars. And Kurt Vonnegut wrote really powerfully about Armistice Day. And so for the second year in a row, we're going to use his words to open our Shabbat service tonight. He said, "When I was a boy, all the people of all the nations which had fought in the First World War were silent during the 11th minute of the 11th hour of Armistice Day, which was the 11th day of the 11th month. It was during that minute in 1918 that millions upon millions of human beings stopped butchering one another. I have talked to old men who were on battlefields during that minute. They have told me in one way or another that the sudden silence was the voice of God. So we still have among us some men who can remember when God spoke clearly to mankind." And if you've ever had the opportunity to sit with, talk with, be with somebody who remembered that minute, then you too are part of that chain. And those of us without that direct connection, I think we can still take some of the sense of what happens when violence stops and a space is made in which we can hear clearly again. I'm going to make our land acknowledgement and then invite you to join me in lighting candles for Shabbos. Located on the traditional lands and waterways of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples past and present, we acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. And if you turn in your Siddur to page 120, please join me in the blessings over the candles. And I'll draw your attention to the candles that are also here a little bit lower on the bima, which we did consider using, but decided for safety reasons would remain ceremonially visible only and not lit. But you can imagine them. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת. We turn to page 142 and greet the better angels of our nature, which I think are really each other, who come and hover around these candle flames and greet us on Shabbat. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem Leishon Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We return to page 130 and begin to pace ourselves through this week that is gone as we approach Shabbat. So we begin with Psalm 95, Lechuna Ranana. Tzur Yish'enu Nekadem Apana B'toda Bizmirot Nariyalo Ki El Gadol Adonai Umelech Gadol al kol Elohim Asher beyado mechkere haaretz v'tofot harim lo Yada da da da. Yada da da da. Yada da 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 da. Yada da da da. We turn to page 131 for Psalm 96, and we are in the first two lines in Hebrew on the second paragraph here. Yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz yiram hayam u'malo'o. The skies will rejoice, and so will the earth, and the seas and all within it will thunder. Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim, v'tagel haaretz. Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim. V'tagel haaretz. Yiram hayam, yiram hayam, yiram hayam u'melo. Yiram hayam, yiram hayam, yiram hayam u'melo. Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yishmechu hashamayim, v'tagel haaretz. Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim, v'tagel haaretz. Yiram hayam, yiram hayam, yiram hayam u'melo. Yiram hayam, yiram hayam, yiram hayam u'melo. Page 132. At the bottom, the last paragraph of Psalm 97, Or zarua latzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. This one is a round, so if you've heard it before, feel free to layer it up. And if you haven't, feel free to sing along loudly anyway. That's the best way to do these. Or zarua latzadik ule yishrei lev simcha. 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 Or zaru ala tzadik, ule Yisrael simcha. On page 133, Psalm 98, which we're going to read in English. I wonder if there is somebody online who would be interested in reading. Sandra, may I call on you to unmute and to read in English Psalm 98?
A psalm, sing to Adonai, a new song, or no?
Yes.
Oh, okay. A psalm, sing to Adonai a new song, for God has worked wonders. God's right hand, God's holy arm has won God victory. Adonai has manifested God's victory, has displayed God's triumph in the sight of the nations. God was mindful of God's steadfast love and faithfulness toward the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth beheld the victory of our God. Raise a shout to Adonai, all the earth. Break into joyous songs of praise.
Toda, and thank you for your service. We turn to page 135 for Psalm 99. We'll go to the bottom paragraph in the Hebrew here, the song of exaltation, to go with the triumph of the psalm previous. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. We turn to page 136 for Psalm 29, taking us through every way the natural world both reflects and quakes at the power of what may be greater than it. Mizmor leDavid, avul Adonai b'nei Eli, avul Adonai, kavod ba'ozai, avul Yevot shemo yishtachavu l'Adonai behadra kodesh. Kol Adonai al hamayim el hakavod hirim. Adonai al mayim rabim. Kol Adonai Akoach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, Vayshaber Adonai et arzei halevanon, Vayarkidem kemo egel, Lebanon, Syrian, כמו ונראים, כל אדוני חוצב להבות איש, כל אדוני יכיל מדבר, יכיל אדוני מדבר קדיש, כל אדוני יכול אלילות, ויחשוף יערות ובחלו כולו מרכבו די אדוני למה הוא ישב וישב אדוני מלך לעולם אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום יאי די 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 יאי די 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 יאי די 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 יאי די 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 די. We have arrived one day after another, one foot after another, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. Here we are in this space on this day of peace, of fulfillment, of creation, and of memory. And as we get ready to really greet Shabbat coming in the door, we're also going to really greet one another. So those of you who are online, feel free to come off mute and say Shabbat Shalom. We'll stop sharing for a second so we can say hi to one another. Find somebody who you might not have met before or might not have greeted yet this Shabbat, and feel free to say Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Ora Weiss, beloved colleague. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Wendy and Judy and Simone and Miguel and Sandra and Mitch. And there's somebody I'm not seeing. And Graciela and Judy. Good Shabbos. Okay, we are going to turn to page 138 to 139. We're going to sing Lecha Dodi. Tonight we are going to do verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. When we get to verse 9, I'll invite you to rise in body or in spirit to face a door. If you're at home, a window, a door, any space that feels like a way to invite Shabbat in, orient yourself towards that, and then we'll bow a little bit as the Shabbos bride comes in. So, page 138. Please rise in body or in spirit, face that opening, and invite Shabbat through. Boi v'shalom materet bala, gam b'simcha uv'tola, toch emunei am segula, boi chala, boi chala, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Have a seat. Sit down with Shabbat. Make her comfy. Get comfy yourselves. And we're going to continue with her favorite song on page 140, the Psalm of Shabbat, Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat. And tonight we'll sing the indented text near the bottom of the page to Louis Lewandowski's Immortal Melody. Tzadik atamar yifrach, Perez balvanun iskashetolim, beveit Adonai, bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu, odinu vun beseva, deshenim merananim ihyu lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzuri tzuri velo avlatapo. At the top of page 141, Psalm 93. Adonai malach keut lavish, lavish Adonai oz hitazar, avtikon devil baltimod. Edotecha nemnu meod, levetecha nava kodesh. Edotecha nemnu meod, levetecha nava kodesh. Adonai leorech yamim. We turn to page 144. Please rise in body or spirit for the Chatzi Kaddish, which will follow with the Barchu, the call to prayer. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hiroteh ve'amlich malchuteh, b'chai hechon uvyomechon, uv'chai dechol beit Yisrael, bagala uvizman kariv, ve'imru amen. Yehi shmeh Rabbah mevarach, le'alam ulal me'al maya. ויתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמך קודשא בריחו לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai habarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai המבורך לעולם ועד. You can be seated. We continue on page 148 with Ma'ariv Aravim. מרוחת אדוני אלוהינו מלכי העולם, אשר בדבריו מעריב הרבים בחוכמה פותח שערים. לתבונה משנה לעתים ומחליף בזמנים. ומעבירה יום ומביאה לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמה. אל חיה וקיימת תמיד ימלך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב הרבים. Page 150. Another essential ingredient in peace is love. אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נחכה יומם בלילה יומם בלילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים לחיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם Adonai Elohechem, Amen. We read together in English at the top of page 157. Please join me. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. On the top of page 158, we sing. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot osef eleh. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע הים לפני משה ומרים, זה הליאנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. It is a strange and wonderful thing to see, I think, an experience that many service people have had reflected in the pages of our liturgy, where just after a hard and perilous passage through walls of water that threatened to crash in on every side, upon reaching the shore and safety, what we ask for next in our service tonight is peace and protection. There's jubilation somewhere, but first that need to let the adrenaline go and to trust that we have come to a place where our feet can stand. So please join me on page 160 in the Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Nehamideinu Shomreinu Lechaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Nehamideinu Shomreinu Lechaim Ushmor tzitinu uvoinu lechaim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu le'shalom nehamideinu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים. At this point in the service, it's become our custom to include a Misha Berach as part of that sense of seeking protection, seeking safety, seeking assurance. And so we turn to page 371. I'm going to read the names that I have on my list of folks in our community who we already know are in need of our prayers for healing. If you're online, please feel free to put into the chat any additional names that you would like to have known and prayed for consciously tonight. If you're here in the sanctuary with me, feel free to say names as I look around. And I hope we will all include in our hearts, in our prayers, both veterans and active service members who I think both deserve and need every ounce of healing energy that one can find and direct their way. So together on page 371. Tonight we pray for the healing of Tikva bat Avraham Basara, Leah bat Yisrael Tzvi and Dina Bela, Karen daughter of Beth, Yehuda Yosef ben Bunsa, Debbie Bouchard, Idka bat Brindle, Pam and David Burrell, Chaya bat Chana, Devorah bat Chaim Esther, Conrad Howard Entwistle, Michelle Fallon, Joan Gitlin, Thelma Grant, Rivka Basfarbush HaKohen, Janice, Don Coppell, Audrey Kopelman, Jack Lamprin, Mark Lamprin, Norman Lavoie, Chana Bat Merrill, Rachel Mira, Yaakov Ben Moshe, Moshe and Sarah, Isabel Nagy, Barbara Parker, Sarah Dina Bat Pesha, Yeshir Yehoshua Ben Rivka, Aharon Zelig Ben Sarah, Pearl Shayevitz, Krendel Chana Bat Leib Vabatya, Pesia Bat Shaul Umalka Halevi, Yehuda Avraham Ben Mendel Halevi Umalka, Nechama Bat Arthur Vehelen, Zalman Ben Chaim Aron Verivka, Rina Roseman, Yaakova Ilana Bat Reuvena Devora, Chana Shoshana Bat Avraham Vesara, Shimon Ben Yitzchak, Aharon Vachaya Sora, Deborah Etzel Bat Moshe Vetzipka Velba, Jill and Wyatt, Miriam Bat Ze'ev, Yehuda Ben Zorach. Are there other names? Maybe we started. Talia Ahuva Bat Shoshana, Norman Blank, Lisa, Val, and Anne. Are there any others from the chat? Okay. For the folks whose names we know and for those whose names we don't know, together we pray. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, We turn to page 162 for the Vishamaru, our covenant of Shabbat, and I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing this together before turning inward to our Amidah. Page 162. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. איי 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 ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. We turn to page 164. We'll sing these words together, and then we'll take a couple of minutes for private prayer. That will take you through page 178, and we'll come together on 180 again for a prayer for peace. So 164, we sing the words of the psalmist. Adonai Shabbatai tiftach ufi agit hilatecha. Adonai Shabbatai tiftach ufi agit hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Osa shalom bibromav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshevei tevel, yase shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. 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 Yase shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshevei tevel, ve'imru amen. Tonight is Peace Shabbat, and we are taking this opportunity to learn about one particular member of our Jewish community who made it his business amid a time of war to make some peace, to make some security, to make some connection to tradition and some comfort for the people around him in his role of chaplain assistant. So our very own temple member, Jonathan Goldfield, is going to speak with us about his father, Corporal Morris Goldfield, and his service during World War II. And I'm going to yield the bima and come and sit where I can see you as well. Thank you for sharing him with us.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom, those out there on Zoom. Thank you, Cantor, very much for inviting me to the Bema and allowing me to share this about my father, Morris Goldfield, and my brother and sister, Joel and Katie, are aware of this as well, and hoping they would join us online as well. To begin with, we put the map up, please, because I want to talk about the South Pacific for a brief moment. So the areas that we're talking about are in the lower right side next to Australia. If we can just go down a little bit, there we go. And you go a little bit to the left so we can see the South Solomon Islands. There we go. You see the red arrows there. So the red arrow at the bottom points to New Caledonia. And this story really is around the Emanu-El division. Most divisions in the Army have a number. Emanu-El became part of the 23rd Infantry Division, but it was an emergency division that was formed with a name after the invasion of Pearl Harbor. And it was started initially on New Caledonia, hence American Division in New Caledonia, Emanu-El Division. And its symbol is the Southern Cross, which is, go back to me real quick. There we go. That's the patch, the Emanu-El Division. The Southern Cross is a star constellation you can see in the Southern Hemisphere. So I'm not going to talk a lot about Fort Edwards, where my father had his training before the war started, actually. And I have many snapshots that showed the life of soldiering, from the latrines to the mess tents to barracks to troop transports and tanks and all those things you see on TV and in war movies. But we'll start with a letter that he sent to his oldest sister, Doris, and her husband, Dr. Eddie Winston, in Manchester by the Sea, where their first home was. And the letter is actually dated, interestingly, 19 January 1941, but the envelope is postmarked 20 January 1942, which was the actual year, of course, because the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th. My father had joined the Army in March of 1941, long before the war started. So now he's been in training at Camp Edwards up in New York. He's been down to South Carolina for maneuvers in the hot weather down there in preparation. And these are some parts of a letter that he sent to his sister and brother-in-law, Eddie. Doris and Eddie was his oldest sister. Today is the day that we move out for parts unknown. That is all I'm allowed to say. Dearest Doris and Eddie, the other night I attended a military wedding and was fortunate enough to be one of those to hold up the chuppah. The first time I had that occasion. He went on to say, my eyes watered as I tried to foresee the future. God has been with me to now. So why should he not guide me through this trial? He went on to say further, many dark days are ahead, but as dark as they are, I shall think of both of you. May God be with both of you and guide you through life. May happiness and health know both of you. And then he went on to say how he made out a life insurance policy for his mother in Chelsea. Very briefly, as you can see, Dad was a pretty prolific writer, and I'll read one more letter from him later. Most of them were typed. There were quite a few that were handwritten. So they shipped out on January 23rd, 1942. They arrived in Australia on February 26th, 1942 in Melbourne. If you look up the history, the convoy shipped out to Australia, and Dad was in that troop convoy, Task Force 6814, 20,000 troops on 7 transports. He didn't get home to Fort Devens here in Massachusetts until January 6, 1945. He arrived at Fort Devens after 42 months overseas, plus the time he'd been in training at Fort Edwards. Now let's talk a little bit about what happened overseas. There won't be a whole lot of military stories here. When you're at war, and his initial job was as an infantryman in the Signal Corps. And even though when he was at Fort Edwards and in South Carolina on the troops ships with 4,000 newfound friends, there was a lot of poker played. He held on to his money pretty well. A lot of folks lost their money. He told me 2 men ended up with all of it on that ship. But most of the story starts after he was inducted into the as a chaplain, assistant to the chaplain. But he still had helped with services. He still helped the chaplains at the fort and when he got to Australia and New Caledonia. And but he was still an infantryman. And he only told me over the course of understanding when he was in the war, 2 war stories that I'm not even going to share with you at this point. I'll talk about them privately. What I want to talk about is peace. His focus on life during the war was to make things better for people, be it soldiers, be it the natives of the Philippine Islands and the Solomon Islands when they liberated those islands. And those were the things he was most proud of. He never really spoke about it, and I'll tell you how he did come to speak about it. If we could go to the first shot that's labeled Guadalcanal, October 1943, please. It has 4 snapshots on it. Next one after that, I think. That'll be the next one will be actually the heading and then be the first slide, and then it'll go to the snapshots. But what he did was what happened was I was in 6th grade Hebrew school at Temple Bethel in Swampscott. And we were reading a book called The History of the Jews in America. And there we go. You had it. Oh, but okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. This is about the only shot I'm going to show of combat. So the upper left corner is my father in Guadalcanal. He had a Thompson submachine gun. That was what his issue was. I'm not going to. In picture next to it is Henderson Field at the 1st Marine Regiment, along with the Ameri-Cal Division took Guadalcanal, and then ultimately the Ameri-Cal Division took over and relieved the 1st Marine Regiment. But that is a picture of 500-pound bombs that went on the airplanes that when we took Henderson Field. Below is a photo of my father, and I believe that is another assistant chaplain. And then just a picture of him, just a moment of relaxation, I suppose. The stories that he told us were how he administered his duties as an assistant chaplain, but that didn't happen until officially December of 1943. After I saw him in the book, and we'll come to a photo shortly of him in a service on the front lines in Guadalcanal, it was a similar picture to that. And if we could go to the next photo in the sequence, I want to talk about the Sabbath in Guadalcanal. Next one. Good. And we can get the scroll up a little bit so we can see the whole photo. So if you look at the front of the service, leading the service, Rabbi Rothschild is to his right, and that's my father that's closest to the camera. That was, and this was written by Chaplain Jacob M. Rothschild, and I actually provided a link. If you have time to look it up online, there's a fascinating story. Now, my father got very involved with the human rights struggle, donated to the Southern Poverty Law Center and other Howard University, a number of other schools, and you're going to see why in a minute. But this article is written in the Sentinel by Rabbi Rothschild, blessed memory. This was Guadalcanal on a Friday evening, just 1 year ago. So this was actually 1943, I believe. It didn't get published until a year later because of the censors, right? Barebacked, dusty, tired soldiers smelling of the thick, stagnant jungle where they were relentlessly driving back the enemy, gathered in a small clearing in the front of my tent for Jewish services, with rifles neatly stacked under the blue and white chaplain's flag and a flight of P-38s patrolling the air above us. We lifted our voices in prayer for a speedy victory and a return to our loved ones. If we could go to the next shot, because this is going to be, my father was a prolific newspaper clipper, and he wrote an awful lot of articles, and he collected them as well. And so did the Jewish Welfare Board, which is who he reported for as a Jewish lay chaplain. So what this picture is on the top is the front view of the Friday evening services in Guadalcanal. The menorah was hand-wrought and presented to me by a group of Seabees. Those were the building personnel on the Navy ships. Jewish and non-Jewish alike, who had helped build the roads, construct the repair and airfields on Guadalcanal. Each candle holder was made from a 20-millimeter cartridge. As I lit the candles each Friday evening, bringing forth memories of home and Sabbath family gatherings, many a jungle fighter unashamedly brushed away a tear. And if you see that Magen David and that top photo in the back, that's the same one that's on this portable ark, or they call it portable synagogue. This portable ark was Army issue, built for all the religious groups, but they were customized to your religion. This one obviously has the 10 Commandments. It has the candlesticks. It has the wine glass, and it's meant to carry a small Sefer Torah and all the prayer books. And those, I have a couple of them. We have 5 of them still. They were published by the Jewish Welfare Board. And this is an authentic item that actually traveled through Guadalcanal, Bougainville, and it saw action. And it was in the front lines. Now that bottom photograph, if we go back to the last photo, the bottom one of the photograph, that bottom photograph, you can see a service being led. And that's a very similar photo that I saw in that book back when I was just turning 13, of my father and Rabbi Rothschild leading a burial service on Bougainville, which was the next action after Guadalcanal that they moved on to in his division. And the gentleman to the right is my father. And we have very, very similar builds. We look pretty much, you'll see a picture of him at the end. We very much look alike, obviously. And that's how I knew it was him right away. Same posture, same size, same shape of the body. And I couldn't believe it. After I brought that book home and showed it to him, he started telling stories. And not until then. Never knew much. He'd tell us jokes about it, how he'd ride on a donkey and throw rotten salami at the enemy. I mean, he never told serious stories about it. It was those kinds of stories, but it was always about the right things. Now, if we go to the next photograph, I call it number 5. This is Fiji. That's Kol Nidre service in 1943. Rabbi Rothschild is sitting to my father's left. My father's at the speaker's desk. This was a tremendous service. There were hundreds of soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen in this congregation. At one point, I have a larger photograph of the whole congregation. And when I was a congregant at Congregation Beth Israel in Andover, one of the members believed that one of the sailors, and it was behind the scene that you see was her father, and she believed it might have been her father in that service because he was in Fiji at the same time for Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur. So it's entirely possible that a local person, and many people from the Americal division were from this area. There is a New England division. Can we go to the next slide? So here's an article from the Daily Globe, the Boston Globe. Okay, that's a different one. There it is. Okay. So Chelsea Technical Corporal proves efficient chaplain. Now, at this point, Rabbi Rothschild was stricken with malaria in Fiji, and he was sent home. At that point, my father was the only chaplain for his regiment. So this goes on to talk about it. And this article basically says the armor rating of Maurice, back then he was Maurice H. I guess he changed his name after the war. It was more convenient to have a middle initial. You'd had to put NMI, no middle initial, on everything. So I think, I don't know, there's some story there, but an army rating of Maurice H. Goldfield, 51 Parker Street, Chelsea, is that of technician 5th grade, equivalent to a corporal, yet he has made a name for himself and is assistant chaplain at Jewish services among officers and men of the they have the American division. That's incorrect. It's Americal division. In many parts of the Pacific, Goldfield conducts 6 services a week in Bougainville with an attendance of more than 200. Frequently, he conducts services in frontline units. He was inducted into the service early 1941, and since then has conducted Jewish services in the Carolinas, in convoys, Australia, Guadalcanal, and in the Fijis. The accompanying illustration was snapped during a service in the Fijis, shows him standing beside a tablet of the 10 Commandments. On Guadalcanal, Goldfield assisted the Americal division's Jewish chaplain. When the division was sent to Fiji, the rest of the additional training, he conducted services there. He led the observance of the Jewish holy days of September and October, also the services of Yom Kippur. He organized a choir of 16 men who sang the Kol Nidre. In the Fijis, Goldfield had the assistance of PFC Daniel Kaplan of Springfield, who served as cantor. The Chelsea soldier went to Bougainville with the division and conducted the first Jewish funeral services. So it was serious business, though he always wrote casually everything's great. He grew a victory garden. That made a bunch of articles in the local papers. And he had peppers and couldn't get lettuce going very well, but he got everything else going. He had amazing endive. You name it, he had it. And he had fresh salad and he served it. He used it. Now he even fished. And I'll get to that in a minute. So he wrote this letter and it's on. You shoot back to me real quick. Don't want to frighten anybody. So he had a typewriter because he was in a tent with a typewriter because most of his job was typing letters home. He even wrote the letters when soldiers were killed. He had to write those letters home to the parents and family. And but he wrote the weekly reports and the monthly reports that looked like this. His official military issue of their daily activities, and it went up through the chaplaincy corps, and it was filed as due course. But so he wrote this letter in 10 September 1944 to his parents. He says, "Hi, y'all." Remember, he had been in South Carolina for a while on maneuvers. "It's just before chow, so I'll see if I can sneak in a few lines. Completed our schedule for the week, and I don't know whether I'm tired or if it's just a case of heat exhaustion. Perhaps I worked too hard with my laundry early this morning. The thing you have to refrain from is that too difficult manual labor if you have an administrative job, because it really weakens you. I suppose you are receiving quite a few regards from friends of mine who have returned home on the rotation plan. Now, don't feel discouraged. They were fortunate for some reason or another to be selected. My time will come eventually. After all, I have stood at 32. This is at only 32 months. He went home at 42 months. I have stood at 32 months. Another 6 will not matter much. Nothing particularly exciting has happened this week." This is from Bougainville. All right. There was plenty of exciting things happening there, but he's understating it. Of course, the censors have to allow these things to go through. So he goes on to say how they sang with a choir of African Americans. They had the high holidays, and they'd be interested to know that he's up for a physical exam pertinent to officer candidate school. And he goes on to say that he wants to stay a corporal because he finds it too important to be doing that ministry. That if he got promoted to sergeant, he'd back the Signal Corps, that sort of thing. And he writes on, I picked a couple sweet peppers and some endives. I took some vitamins along with me to chow. Those green peppers are certainly tasty. I also planted popcorn some time ago and they are well up. Remember, this is a guy that came originally from Woodsville, New Hampshire. So I noticed the rain raised havoc with the young stock, so I'll have to spend a few hours this afternoon fixing the crop. Now he gets serious. I was indeed most hurt to hear that Freddie Ginsburg had been killed by bombing. Why, it seems only yesterday that he was a frail lad and so young. I have seen so much death, so I am prepared for any sort of news of this sort. Leonard Fisher was also hard to believe. This is a long war ahead. Anyone who is unduly optimistic is selling himself a wrong bill of good. This is no time for optimism, for many lives will be lost before it is all over. Based on my work, it is my wish that you don't worry about me nor even wonder why I don't return home at this late date. I have seen too much of this life, knowing the sacrifices each and every man must make to even think of going home. When they tell me I have had enough, then I shall take my turn at rotation. Until that time arrives, I'm not the least concerned. This is no time to be selfish just because I'm your son. You may need me, but my country needs me more than you do. It is the future I'm concerned with, and my future will be the outcome of the fruit of my sacrifices. I can do a lot for the boys in my division. If I leave, chances are my position will not be duplicated and they must have someone to represent them. I feel proud of the task assigned to me, and every day offers more enlightenment. Mind you, I have not turned down rotation. So his duty, his devotion. I haven't met a serviceman or woman who hasn't had that same feeling. And it's just an amazing mindset, an amazing devotion to country, family, and colleagues. Go to the next shot, please. Should be the forward. Next, that, yeah, is that it? Yeah, that's it, I believe. So I did both sides of the newspaper. This is a Yiddish newspaper called The Forward. Kind of wrote it in Yiddish, the top there. And what it says is, those, I say the four tenors, these were all lay chaplains or assistant to the chaplain, or they were just congregants. They were combat infantry men who participated in services as well. The names are listed here, and I'm going to say them because it's the right thing to do. There's left to right, it's Private Max Brooks of Brooklyn, New York, Private Herbert Rosner, also of Brooklyn, New York, Corporal Maurice Goldfield of Chelsea, Mass, who conducted the services, and Private Victor Shapiro of Chicago, Illinois. And they explain the Torah and everything else. Now, the picture on the right, we know that this took place around 1945, even though Bougainville, because they didn't invade, we didn't take back Cebu in the Philippine Islands until 1945. And these are people celebrating in the street and dancing for the soldiers. They were so grateful to be liberated. I mean, many of them were put into slavery and, of course, killed during the occupancy by the Japanese Imperial Army. So when the Ameri-Cal division and the other divisions came in and liberated Cebu and the other islands, there were serious gratitude, and gifts were given. My father brought home grass skirts and other things that people had given him. And those are the memories he shared mostly with us. So I just wanted to pause on that for a moment. Could we go to the next slide, please? Number 9, I think, the labor attachment. Now, this is where I want to be very serious. So what we have here is Bougainville and a labor attachment of African Americans that was tasked to Bougainville. They did all the manual labor. My father told me that a number of these people were dentists, accountants, lawyers, folks with college educations, and they were put into these labor, and their officer is a white man, the lieutenant. Now, the man in front is a sergeant first class. It's an African American. There were several non-NCOs, non-commissioned officers. But that was the nature of the 40s. But every weekend, they all got together with a Jewish congregation, and they sang together. They did services together. My father said he learned spirituals from them, and they learned our prayers as well. They had philosophical conversations about their lives because they were both segregated to an extent. And that was the reality of the 40s. And I wondered, my father, coming from Woodsville, New Hampshire, and then growing up largely in Chelsea, why would he find this affinity? If you were to look up Rabbi Rothschild's biography, there's a photo of him with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. in Pittsburgh, where the rabbi was an active civil rights advocate. There's no doubt in my mind that my father took influence from him and Rabbi Weitz, which was the follow-up chaplain, who also was a scholar and wrote quite a few books. And I think those things had an indelible effect on my father and his life forward. And he talked about this as one of the most proud things that he talked about, of these relationships of these gentlemen and the relationships they all had together on Bougainville. Could we go to the next slide, please? I just wanted to show that's what the arc, how it was set up, the bottom picture especially. And that's what we have here to show that is, I can't say for sure it's the same arc. They were Army issue, but it's pretty darn close. That's what they looked like. And they carried all the supplies they needed. And I'm going to read a little article that was called Filipino Filibuster by Rabbi Samuel Silber. I'm just going to read a paragraph from it. I referred before to the men who have voluntarily shouldered the responsibility of handling Jewish activities in the absence of Jewish chaplains. An outstanding late chaplain of this kind is Technical 5, T5, Morris Goldfield, son of Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Goldfield, 51 Parker Street, Chelsea, Mass. Goldie is in the Ameri-Cal division, has been ministering to the infantrymen like a full-fledged chaplain. He has arranged regular services, presided over the celebration of holidays, visited the sick, buried the dead, handled personal problems, maintained contact with the Jewish Welfare Board, JWB, and has been a tower of support to several Jewish chaplains. All this time, he has remained humble, a humble infantryman himself, and weathered a number of combat campaigns. During combat, he conducted services for his grim and grimy comrades in the most forward areas. When Goldfield came to this island, he was loaded down with religious supplies and had been given the title in the division of Director of Jewish Activities. I am the supply chaplain here, but he supplied me with cedar rims, stationery, books, pamphlets, and 2 arks that had been borne by modern Israelites through the wilds of New Guinea. Goldie and his division left this area and took part in one of the roughest invasions of the Philippine campaign. In the midst of the operation, Goldie managed to conduct sidarim for his men. And whereas we chaplains had to resort to quartermaster food, Goldie had gefilte fish for his seder, thoughtfully ordered far in advance. It would be well if JWB had some decoration to bestow upon the heroes of military religion like Goldfield. Soon Goldie is coming home on rotation. It would be well if the Boston Jewish community conferred some recognition upon him for his years of devoted sacrificial and consecrated labors. That was May 31st, 1945. If we go to the next photo, and I'll be wrapping up shortly. So I'll go back one. There you go. So that's not it. Oh yeah, that is it. So the bottom picture actually just shows the ark, but I also wanted to point out that is a Friday night sermon being conducted. Back to the last one. There, the bottom photo there. That is a sermon being conducted by a Protestant minister. I don't think that they had a rabbi at that point, and I think everybody helped each other out. I wish I knew more about it. I hadn't seen that picture before. I kind of found it as I was going through the envelopes of photos that my father had, and I just thought it was very telling. And the picture on top, of course, I believe that actually is Rabbi Weiss. I believe that is, and this, my father is the fourth from the right, overlooking right in the corner. He'd be over here at Gabbai, that side there, I guess. But I believe that's the rabbi that actually sent a letter, Chaplain Martin M. Weitz. And he basically wrote a letter similar to the article I just read to my grandparents, Joseph and Katie Goldfield. May take this means of expressing my appreciation for the splendid cooperation and fine effective labors done by your son for the Jewish personnel of this area. And it goes on. It's a lovely letter that he has. So those that was dated March 16, 1944. So there's quite a bit of history here, and the community did ultimately honor him. If we go to the next shot, he was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service. And it basically articulates very much what was said in the article I read before, where he pretty much did the duties of an ordained rabbi and an officer, though he was a corporal, and he turned down promotion so he could stay and do the ministry of a chaplain's assistant. And I didn't realize that they gave him the title of Director of Jewish Activity. That's pretty fascinating that a division bestowed a title like that on somebody that didn't really exist in the military before that I knew of. Go to the next shot. And that's my father, Morris Goldfield. Blessed memory. He passed away June 24th, 5 years ago. So that's what I have. I just thank you all, and I thank all the veterans for your service, and God bless everyone. Thank you and good night. And Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Cantor, so much.
Thank you. Thank you for honoring us with the story of your dad. That is incredible service to the people he touched, and I think to all of us as an example of, as you said, really finding his place, finding his way to be an Ohev Shalom and a Rodef Shalom, a lover of peace and a pursuer of peace when war was happening all around him, and to find the comfort that he could bring and the places he could bring a little bit of healing to. We are, as a country, we're not at active war now, thank God, but we see war around us in the world. And I hope that this story of Corporal Goldfield and the way he served both his country and his colleagues and his family can remind us of how much good there is that war can obscure, even as it calls out these kinds of extraordinary acts from people, and how all of our task is both to honor that service and to work together for a world where people who find themselves able to render it also have the opportunity to be home and to be in peace and to use those extraordinary gifts in a time of peace as well as in a time of war. We are going to turn to page 586 for Elenu. Gosh, I can't think of a more appropriate prayer to follow this than this one where we say it is up to all of us to create the world that we want to live in and to safeguard it for one another. So please rise in body or in spirit. I'm going to open the Ark, the Aron HaKodesh. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. We turn to the top of page 591 and read together in English. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום יחיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Please be seated. We turn to page 598 for the Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish. And I want to invite Jonathan back up because there is this incredible role of honor, role of those for whom the division, I guess, was saying
Yes.
Kaddish. He created, do you want to say a word, Kaddish?
Sure. So my father had this calligraphy done of men who were killed or missing in action in Guadalcanal and Bougainville. And they carried this throughout the South Pacific. And at every Kaddish Yidom, they read these names. Thank you.
In our community tonight, we are in Shaloshim, the first 30 days of mourning for Jacqueline Fry. And we link her name to the names of those who have died at this time of year in years past. Morris Bakerman, Nellie Pearl Cohen, Marlon Cohen, Dora M. Cohen, Manuel M. Epstein, June Feldman, David Glazer, Julius Greenberg, Isaac Hirschberg, Rabbi Abraham Jacobson, Ruth Clevin, Mildred Kniznik, Barton Kotzen, Frederick Myers, Albert Rosenfield, Susan Rosengard, Barney Siegel, Samuel Shapiro, Rachel Shapiro, Lena Shapiro, Harry Smith, Arthur L. Weiner, and Albert Zeltzer. And as we prepare for Kaddish, there are these beautiful pamphlets that Paula has put together with the names of Jewish war veterans from this area, from Haverhill, and also online you can access them. I believe they're on our website, but I also want to invite folks to put into the chat any names of veterans of blessed memory that you are thinking of tonight and who you would like us to know. And at the end of Kaddish, we'll read those names as well, and I'll invite them. You folks, please rise in body or in spirit if you're in mourning, if you're recalling a yahrzeit, or if it's your custom to rise and say Kaddish for those whose families can't. Page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביום חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמך רבה מברך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמך דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. May the memories of our beloved dead be for a blessing. May the memories of those who have served our country with such honor and such self-sacrifice be for a blessing. Are there names in the chat that we should read aloud? Alfred Casson and Charles Deerdorf. Thomas Kroner. Irving Blank. And the names we'll come up and read them in here. Morris Goldfield. May their memories be for a blessing. We have Shabbat services tomorrow morning. We have at 1 p.m. Torah study because our Shabbat services will be with Sim Shalom, so it's a longer service. Tomorrow evening at 6 online, there is an MVP Micah dinner, Ministry and Community Action Honoree dinner that will, among other worthy people in the Merrimack Valley, honor Sharon for her work with immigrants. And so I hope folks will join for that. And Sunday morning at 10, all on Zoom, is our first author series event of the year, author Jennifer Ann Moses, who wrote a book of short stories called The Man Who Loved His Wife. And finally, I have just learned about a trip to Israel that CJP is planning in honor of Israel's 75th anniversary of being a modern nation state. The trip will take place. They have 2 trips that they're planning. There's one for adults that's in April. There's a later one in the summer for families, but there's an information session about the adult trip for folks who are generally, broadly in the North Shore area. And that is Tuesday, November 15th. That's this upcoming Tuesday at 6 p.m. I put some flyers out there. If anybody online is interested, please email me. I can send it to you. But that's on Zoom. It looks like a wonderful opportunity and a chance to travel with other folks who are in the area. So if you're interested, please go ahead and check that out. And then they will form cohorts who will do some study through the year, preparing for the trip together and really getting to know one another and think about it. Are there other announcements? Okay. We will turn to page 122. Please join me for Kiddush. Then we'll turn to page 625 to close with Adon Olam. And after that has concluded, I would love to have you come back up and read those names, if you would, from that scroll. Thank you. ויהי ערב ויבוקר יום השישי, ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבא העם, ויחל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה, וישפוט ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה, ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי, ויקדש אותו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות זברי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו ורצה בנו, בשבת קודשו באהבה וברצון הנחילנו, זיכרון למעשה בראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, בשבת קודשך, באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. We turn to page 625 for Adon Olam. I have picked this tune both to honor all who have served and in honor and memory of one particular veteran in our community, Zichrono Livracha, whose favorite way it was to sing this. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Ve'ed Nasa V'chefzo Kol Azay Melech Shemo Nikra, Shabbat Shalom. God bless. Thank you, veterans and active service members, for your service. And we'll conclude our service by reading these names of local guys, yep, who were carried with such love and such attention and intention throughout the Philippines.
Benjamin Azarva, November of 1942. Sidney Becker, January 1943. Jacob Brodsky, missing in action, January 1943. Meyer Blumenthal, April 1944. Milton Chibnik, March 1944. Marvin L. Frank, January 1943. Isidore Freeman, January 1943. Nathan Grease, April 1944. Morris Kaplan, November 1942. Solomon Katz, August 1944. Herbert Hopfenberg, May 1944. Barnett Class, November 1942. Sidney Noretsky, November 1942. Harold Pomsovi, March 1944. George Popel, November 1942. William Nussbaum, March 1944. Edward Rothafel, July 1943. Harry Ruhr, February 1943. Abraham Shapiro, December 1942. Gilbert Seidenberg, March 1944. Harry S. Tolan, January 1944. D.I. Rosenberg, January 1943. I. Williansky, February 1945. Lewis Miller, March 1945. William Krasner, March 1945. L. M. Lorber, April 1945. Seymour Levine, April 1945. And R. Greenstein, April 1945.
Like your dad and your family, now we will take this history that you've shared with us forward tonight and take pride in his service and in the service of all those in our community who have dedicated themselves to bringing their bravery, bringing their care, and bringing their endurance to defending freedoms and to keeping those they love and their country safe. This concludes our service. Toda rabba, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining us online. Thank you for joining us in the sanctuary, and feel free to amble on back and eat a little something sweet. And if you're at home, I hope you do exactly the same. Something good in your home. Good Shabbos. Toda rabba. And thank you again to Jonathan for putting together this beautiful, beautiful learning for us and bringing your dad into our space. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Ora Weiss.
Thank you for that beautiful tribute, for allowing that. I needed something tonight, and I was right. This was it. So thank you very much.
I'm glad you came. I'm glad your presence was part of it. Good Shabbos and Toda rabba.
Good Shabbos.
Yeah.